On the afternoon of March 11, 2011, the people of Japan experienced something they had prepared for all their lives. Office workers calmly stepped away from their desks as buildings began to sway. High-speed trains stopped automatically. Factory machines shut down within seconds. Across the country, millions of mobile phones suddenly came alive with the same urgent warning. A major earthquake has occurred. Prepare for a possible tsunami. For a few moments, everything seemed under control. Japan had spent decades becoming one of the most earthquake-prepared nations on Earth. Its buildings were designed to bend instead of collapse. Its emergency warning systems were among the fastest in the world. Its citizens practiced evacuation drills from childhood. But within minutes, a far greater danger appeared. Out in the Pacific Ocean, an enormous wall of water had already begun racing toward Japan's northeastern coastline. It was invisible from land. It moved faster than a commercial jet at sea, carrying unimaginable energy beneath its surface. By the time many communities saw it, there was almost no time left. The tsunami that followed became one of the deadliest natural disasters in modern history. Entire neighborhoods disappeared. Ports were destroyed. Airports were flooded. More than 18,000 people lost their lives or went missing. Even the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant suffered catastrophic damage after seawater overwhelmed its protective systems. For most countries, a disaster of this scale would have been the end of the story. For Japan, it became the beginning of an entirely new chapter. Instead of asking whether another tsunami would happen, Japanese engineers asked a different question. How can we survive the next one? That single question triggered one of the largest coastal engineering projects ever attempted by any nation. New seawalls rose along hundreds of kilometers of coastline. Massive floodgates were redesigned. Entire towns were rebuilt on higher ground. Artificial forests were restored. Advanced computer models began simulating future tsunamis long before they could happen. Schools changed evacuation procedures, and communities rewrote disaster plans from the ground up. Japan wasn't trying to stop nature. It was trying to buy people something far more valuable: time. Today, Japan possesses what many experts consider the world's most comprehensive tsunami defense system. Not because any single wall can stop the ocean, but because every layer of protection is designed to work together. Physical barriers, early warning technology, evacuation planning, education, and engineering all function as one connected system. But this raises an important question. Why does Japan invest so much money, effort, and technology into defending itself from tsunamis? The answer begins millions of years beneath the Pacific Ocean. Japan may appear as a peaceful chain of islands on a map, but geologically, it sits in one of the most dangerous locations on the planet. 4 major tectonic plates interact around the Japanese archipelago, creating constant seismic activity beneath the surrounding seas. Every year, thousands of earthquakes are recorded in and around Japan. Most are too small to be noticed, but occasionally, the movement of these plates releases an enormous amount of energy beneath the ocean floor. When that happens, the seabed can suddenly rise or fall by several meters, displacing billions of tons of seawater almost instantly. That sudden displacement is what creates a tsunami. Unlike ordinary waves created by wind, tsunami waves involve the movement of the entire water column, from the ocean surface all the way down to the seabed. In deep water, they may appear only a meter high, making them almost impossible to recognize from a passing ship. But they travel at extraordinary speeds, sometimes exceeding 700 kilometers per hour. As these waves approach shallow coastal waters, something dramatic happens. The ocean floor begins to rise beneath them. Their speed decreases. Their energy has nowhere to escape. Instead of continuing forward, the water starts building upward. Within minutes, what looked harmless in the open ocean transforms into a towering wall of water capable of carrying ships, vehicles, houses, trees, and concrete buildings inland. That is why tsunamis are so destructive. They are not simply large waves. They are moving oceans. Japan has learned this lesson repeatedly throughout its history. Long before satellites, supercomputers, or earthquake sensors existed, coastal villages recorded stories of enormous waves arriving without warning. Historical records describe devastating tsunamis striking Japanese communities for centuries. One of the most infamous disasters occurred in 1896, when the Meiji Sanriku tsunami reached run-up heights estimated at nearly 38 meters in some locations and claimed around 22,000 lives. The tragedy fundamentally changed how Japanese scientists began studying tsunamis and eventually led to organized forecasting and coastal protection efforts. The danger did not disappear. In 1933, another major tsunami struck the same region. Then in 1960-something, even more surprising happened. A massive earthquake occurred, not in Japan, but off the coast of Chile, nearly 17,000 kilometers away. Yet hours later, tsunami waves crossed the Pacific Ocean and struck Japan's coastline. That disaster proved an important point. Japan did not only need protection from nearby earthquakes, it also needed protection from tsunamis generated on the opposite side of the planet. That realization changed everything. Scientists expanded tsunami monitoring. Engineers began designing specialized coastal structures. Governments invested in warning systems. Researchers developed numerical tsunami simulations that would later become internationally recognized and influence forecasting methods used far beyond Japan. Over the following decades, Japan gradually transformed its coastline. At first, many of these defenses were relatively simple. Small seawalls protected fishing villages. Concrete embankments reduced wave energy. Coastal forests were planted to slow flooding and trap floating debris. Breakwaters were constructed at the entrances of vulnerable harbors to weaken incoming waves before they reached populated areas. These projects were expensive. Some took decades to complete. Many people questioned whether they were really necessary. Then came March 11, 2011. In a single afternoon, Japan received the answer. The tsunami was far larger than many existing defenses had been designed to withstand. Some seawalls were overtopped, others were damaged. Even the famous Kamaishi tsunami breakwater, the deepest breakwater in the world at the time, could not completely stop the incoming waves. Yet, detailed post-disaster studies showed that many of these structures still reduced wave energy, delayed inundation, and gave thousands of people precious extra minutes to evacuate. Those minutes saved lives. That was perhaps the most important lesson Japan learned. No wall can defeat the ocean forever, but the right system can give people enough time to escape. And that realization became the foundation for the world's most advanced tsunami defense strategy. After the devastating events of 2011, Japan reached a difficult conclusion. It was impossible to build a wall high enough to stop every tsunami. Nature had already proven that. But if the ocean couldn't always be stopped, perhaps it could be slowed. And if it could be slowed, even by a few minutes, thousands of lives could be saved. That idea became the foundation of Japan's modern tsunami defense strategy. Instead of depending on one giant barrier, Japan began creating multiple layers of protection. Every layer had a different job. Some were designed to reduce the force of incoming waves, others delayed flooding, some protected ports and industrial zones, while others simply bought precious time for people to escape to higher ground. The first thing many visitors notice when traveling along Japan's northeastern coastline is the enormous concrete seawalls. From a distance, they resemble highways running beside the ocean. In some places, they are only a few meters tall, but in the areas devastated by the 2011 tsunami, many were rebuilt between 10 and 15 meters high, depending on local hazard assessments. Stretching for kilometers, these structures are among the largest coastal defense projects ever undertaken by a single country. Building them was anything but simple. Every coastline is different. Some villages sit behind narrow bays that naturally amplify tsunami waves. Others face wide-open sections of the Pacific Ocean where waves lose very little energy before reaching land. Engineers couldn't simply copy the same design everywhere. Each community required computer simulations, historical tsunami records, underwater surveys, and geological studies before construction even began. By combining decades of tsunami data with modern computer modeling, engineers calculated how waves would interact with every curve of the coastline. They studied how water accelerated through narrow channels, how it reflected from cliffs, and how it spread across low-lying towns. Only after years of analysis did construction begin. But these seawalls were never intended to make communities invincible. That is one of the biggest misconceptions about Japan's coastal defenses. Their primary purpose is to reduce the speed, height, and destructive force of tsunami waves. Even when a wave overtops a seawall, much of its energy has already been lost. Instead of crashing into buildings at full force, the water reaches inland with less momentum, giving emergency responders and residents more valuable time. Time has always been Japan's greatest objective. Because in a tsunami, every additional minute can mean the difference between survival and tragedy. One remarkable example of this philosophy can be found in the small coastal village of Fudai. For decades, local officials debated whether an enormous seawall should be built around the village. Many believed it was unnecessary and far too expensive. Others argued that such a disaster would never happen during their lifetime. But the village's former mayor refused to compromise. Having witnessed earlier tsunamis during his childhood, he insisted that history should never be ignored. Despite years of criticism, construction finally moved forward. The completed seawall stood approximately 15.5 meters high and included massive floodgates capable of sealing off the valley leading into the town. When the 2011 tsunami struck, neighboring communities suffered catastrophic destruction. Fudai did not. The seawall absorbed much of the incoming water, while the floodgates prevented massive volumes of seawater from rushing directly into the village. Although some surrounding areas experienced flooding, the town itself escaped the level of devastation seen elsewhere. Many residents later described the project as something that had once seemed excessive, but ultimately saved their community. Stories like Fudai changed how Japan viewed disaster prevention. Suddenly, expensive infrastructure was no longer seen as wasteful. It became an investment in human life. But seawalls are only one part of Japan's coastal engineering system. Beneath the ocean surface lies another line of defense that most people never see. These are known as breakwaters. Unlike seawalls, which stand on land, breakwaters are massive underwater or partially submerged concrete structures built offshore. Their job begins long before tsunami waves reach the coastline. As tsunami waves travel across deep water, they carry tremendous energy. When these waves encounter a breakwater, part of that energy is reflected back toward the ocean. Another portion is scattered sideways, while the remaining energy passes through with reduced intensity. The goal is not to stop the tsunami completely. That would be impossible. Instead, engineers try to weaken the wave before it reaches populated areas. One of the most ambitious examples is the Kamaishi Tsunami Breakwater. Located in Iwate Prefecture, it was once recognized as the world's deepest breakwater, with sections anchored nearly 63 meters below sea level. Construction required decades of planning, specialized underwater engineering, and billions of dollars in investment. When the 2011 tsunami arrived, the waves exceeded many design assumptions. The breakwater suffered extensive damage. Some critics immediately declared the project a failure. However, later engineering studies reached a more complex conclusion. Although it could not completely stop such an extraordinary tsunami, the structure significantly reduced wave energy and delayed flooding inside Kamaishi Bay. Those delays provided additional evacuation time and reduced damage in certain areas behind the harbor. Sometimes, success in disaster engineering is measured not by preventing destruction completely, but by reducing its consequences. That lesson continues to shape every new project Japan builds today. In addition to offshore breakwaters, engineers redesigned harbor entrances using enormous steel tsunami gates. Under normal conditions, these gates remain open, allowing fishing boats, cargo ships, and ferries to move freely. But when tsunami warnings are issued, powerful hydraulic systems can rapidly close the gates, limiting the amount of seawater entering rivers, canals, and protected harbors. Many coastal cities also strengthened river embankments. This was necessary because tsunami water does not only arrive from the sea, it can also travel inland through rivers. During the 2011 disaster, seawater moved upstream for several kilometers in some locations, flooding communities that believed they were safely away from the coast. Today, flood barriers, reinforced embankments, and upgraded river gates help reduce that risk. Japan also invested heavily in natural coastal defenses. Although concrete structures receive most of the attention, engineers understand that nature can also play an important role. Along many coastlines, extensive belts of coastal pine forests have been restored or replanted. These forests cannot stop a major tsunami by themselves, but they help trap floating debris, reduce erosion, and slightly weaken smaller waves before they reach populated areas. The combination of natural and engineered defenses creates another protective layer. This philosophy is known as layered resilience. Every barrier performs a different function. No single defense is expected to do everything. If one layer is overwhelmed, another is already waiting behind it. This approach extends beyond physical infrastructure. Roads near the coastline are often designed to become evacuation routes. Bridges are reinforced to remain usable after earthquakes. Critical hospitals are relocated to higher ground whenever possible. Electrical substations are protected against flooding. Emergency shelters are stocked with supplies that can support survivors for days if transportation networks become disrupted. Entire communities are planned around the assumption that another tsunami will eventually arrive. That may sound pessimistic. In reality, it is one of Japan's greatest strengths. Instead of hoping disasters never happen, Japan assumes they will happen and prepares accordingly. Yet, despite all of these remarkable engineering achievements, Japan eventually realized something even more important. Concrete alone cannot save everyone. The strongest seawall in the world is useless if people don't know when to evacuate. And that realization led Japan to develop one of the fastest and most sophisticated tsunami warning systems ever created. As powerful as Japan's seawalls, breakwaters, and floodgates may be, the country's engineers eventually realized a simple truth. Concrete cannot make decisions. People can. No matter how advanced a defense system becomes, it only works if people know exactly when to run. That is why Japan's greatest tsunami defense may not be its walls at all. It may be its ability to warn millions of people within seconds. The moment a powerful earthquake begins beneath the ocean, an invisible race against time starts. The tsunami is already moving. Emergency agencies have only minutes, sometimes only seconds, to estimate where it is heading, how large it could become, and which communities are in danger. Every second matters. To win that race, Japan has built one of the most sophisticated earthquake and tsunami monitoring networks on Earth. Across the country, thousands of highly sensitive seismic stations constantly monitor even the smallest movements beneath the ground. Offshore, pressure sensors and ocean bottom observation systems monitor changes in water pressure that could indicate a developing tsunami. GPS stations measure tiny shifts in the Earth's surface, while data from satellites, coastal tide gauges, and underwater cables flows continuously into the Japan Meteorological Agency's monitoring centers. The moment these systems detect a major undersea earthquake, powerful computers begin analyzing its location, depth, and magnitude almost instantly. Within seconds, emergency algorithms estimate whether the movement of the seafloor is likely to generate a dangerous tsunami. If the risk is significant, tsunami warnings are issued immediately, even before the first wave reaches the coast. Unlike many countries that rely mainly on television broadcasts, Japan delivers warnings through almost every communication system available. Mobile phones suddenly emit a loud emergency alarm that cannot be mistaken for an ordinary notification. Television programs stop immediately. Radio stations interrupt their broadcasts. Electronic highway signs display emergency instructions. Loudspeakers installed throughout coastal towns begin broadcasting evacuation messages. In many communities, outdoor sirens sound continuously until evacuation is complete. For people living near the ocean, these sounds have become instantly recognizable. They know hesitation can be fatal. But technology alone is not enough. Imagine receiving a warning without knowing where to go. That warning would have little value. Japan understood this long ago. That is why nearly every tsunami-prone community has clearly marked evacuation routes leading toward higher ground. Blue evacuation signs appear along roads, sidewalks, schools, train stations, and coastal neighborhoods. Visitors who have never been to Japan often notice these signs without realizing their importance. Every arrow points towards safety. Every route has been carefully planned to remain accessible after an earthquake. Many stairways leading to hillsides have been widened. Emergency lighting has been installed. Bridges are inspected regularly. Obstacles that could block evacuation routes are removed whenever possible. The goal is simple. When people hear the warning, they should never waste time deciding where to run. The path has already been chosen. In areas where mountains are too far away, Japan has constructed another remarkable solution: tsunami evacuation towers. These reinforced concrete structures stand above expected flood levels and provide immediate vertical evacuation for nearby residents. Unlike ordinary buildings, evacuation towers are designed specifically for emergencies. Wide staircases allow hundreds of people to climb quickly. Emergency supplies are often stored inside. Some include backup lighting, communication equipment, drinking water, and emergency toilets in case survivors remain isolated for several hours. In densely populated coastal cities, where reaching higher ground may take too long, these towers provide a last line of protection. Schools have also become an essential part of Japan's disaster strategy. From an early age, children are taught that earthquakes and tsunamis are not rare events. They are a part of life. Instead of creating fear, education focuses on preparation. Students regularly participate in evacuation drills. Teachers practice emergency procedures multiple times each year. Many schools teach children how to recognize natural warning signs themselves. If the ground shakes violently near the coast, they learn one important rule: do not wait. Move to higher ground immediately. This culture of preparedness has saved countless lives. One of the most remarkable examples occurred during the 2011 disaster in the city of Kamaishi. For years, local schools had emphasized independent decision-making during emergencies. Students were repeatedly taught not to rely entirely on adults or wait for official instructions if immediate danger was obvious. When the earthquake struck on March 11th, thousands of schoolchildren began evacuating almost immediately. Many younger children followed older students uphill. Teachers guided groups toward higher elevations, while continuing to move even after reaching what initially appeared to be safe locations. Their decision proved critical. The tsunami rose higher than many expected. Because they continued climbing, the overwhelming majority of those students survived. The event later became known internationally as the Kamaishi miracle. It demonstrated that education can be just as important as engineering. Japan also performs nationwide disaster drills on an extraordinary scale. Every year, around September 1st, Disaster Prevention Day, millions of people participate in emergency exercises. Government agencies, schools, hospitals, businesses, military units, firefighters, police officers, and ordinary citizens all practice responding to major earthquakes and tsunamis. Road closures are simulated. Emergency shelters are opened. Medical teams rehearse mass casualty responses. Communication systems are tested. Entire communities spend the day preparing for an event everyone hopes will never happen. This constant practice creates something difficult to measure but incredibly valuable: confidence. When a real emergency occurs, people are less likely to panic because many have already experienced similar situations during training. Yet despite all of these preparations, Japan understands there is no such thing as absolute safety. The ocean always has the final say. The 2011 tsunami exceeded many hazard assumptions. Some seawalls were overtopped. Warning estimates were revised as more information became available. Entire communities that believed they were protected suffered devastating losses. Instead of hiding these failures, Japan studied them in extraordinary detail. Engineers analyzed damaged infrastructure, Scientists examined every stage of the tsunami. Government agencies interviewed thousands of survivors. Every mistake became a lesson. Every lesson became a new engineering standard. Today, new coastal projects are designed using improved hazard models that consider larger tsunami scenarios than many previous generations of infrastructure. Artificial intelligence and faster computer simulations are being explored to improve tsunami forecasting even further. Offshore monitoring systems continue expanding. Buildings in vulnerable regions are being relocated to higher ground. Communities continue updating evacuation maps as scientific understanding improves. Japan's tsunami defense system is not considered complete. It is constantly evolving, and perhaps that is its greatest strength. Many people believe Japan built the world's most advanced tsunami defense system by constructing giant walls. But the real answer is far more impressive. Japan built a system, not a structure. A system where satellites communicate with underwater sensors, where supercomputers analyze earthquakes within seconds, where mobile phones become emergency warning devices, where schools teach survival as seriously as mathematics, where engineers, scientists, teachers, emergency responders, and ordinary citizens all play equally important roles. Every seawall, every evacuation tower, every warning siren, every emergency drill, every lesson learned from past disasters. Together, they form one of the most comprehensive disaster preparedness systems ever created. Because Japan understands something that every nation vulnerable to natural disasters can learn. You cannot stop the forces of nature. But with preparation, engineering, education, and constant innovation, you can dramatically reduce their impact. The goal has never been to defeat the ocean. The goal has always been to give people the greatest gift possible when disaster strikes.